Thank you so much for coming and joining the Lippert stage. It's going to prove to be really incredible. Some of the topics that we have planned for today are just mind-blowing. We'll be speaking about supply chain leadership. We'll also have country spotlights on Gabon and also on Uganda. Now, if you'd like to be translated to from English to French, please feel free to go to the table right by the entrance over there, and you just grab yourself a headset, and then you would be able to get that translation. We ask that you please do not switch off your phones, but rather that you put them on silent, take as many photos and videos as possible so that you're able to share all of this content that's happening here with your fellow friends, colleagues, and whoever else you think might benefit from it. All we ask is that you use our hashtag AEW24 or hashtag Africa Energy Week. Now, I did mention that this is the Leopard stage. We have used the big five in terms of naming our stages. So we do have the Elephant stage in Hall 1B, that's the Africa Energy Week Town Hall. We have the Lion stage, which is Ballroom East, that's Upstream and E&P Forum. We have the Rhinoceros stage, which is Room 1.4, Powering Africa Summit. And last but definitely not least, we have the Buffalo Room, which is Ballroom West, and that's the Energy Finance Summit. Fantastic. And now we get to start the program. I'm going to be quite the stickler for time because it's quite back-to-back for the rest of the day, so it has a ripple effect on each other, and we have some people who are just flying on the day. We want to make sure that they get out as quickly as possible. So how I will be running it for all the speakers, for those who will be spending the entire day, if you see me standing, it's time to end, and we need to move on to the next topic. We also want to make sure that we break down the conversation and have as much time on the actual conversation and unpacking the themes that we want to unpack. Now, jumping straight into our first speaker for the keynote address, I've had the privilege of meeting her today, and I can already tell you that she's incredible. And I'm not being biased, but she's really, really super incredible, very switched on, very alert. Yesterday there was a minister actually in the room, and I said, he's the man in the arena. And I almost want to give you the title, say, the woman in the arena, the person who's not afraid to do the work, the person who's not afraid to be honest about the challenges, but doesn't just focus on the challenges, wants to also focus on the solutions, because we need to focus on solutions and implementing solutions, not just mentioning the challenges and doing nothing about it. So please help me warmly welcome to stage the Chief Executive Officer of BP South Africa, Taelo Mojapelo.
Good morning, everyone. I have the privilege of starting the day at 9 a.m. And often when you have conferences, you find people wake up at 10 a.m. and they only get here at lunchtime. So hopefully the room gets to fill up over time. So we gathered here today to explore, along with my fellow panelists who you'll meet very shortly, the principles of just energy leadership, and particularly for us to reflect on the role that Africa's leaders play in balancing the competing priorities, demonstrating leadership in harnessing technology, policies, and best practices to overcome some of the current energy challenges that we face today, as well as creating resilient value chains in the process. The necessity to fundamentally change the way the human race thinks about how we consume energy and how energy is distributed places a heavy load on the shoulders of all leaders in the energy industry. And all of you in this room are leaders in some form or shape and should be contributing to this energy transition and ending energy poverty. On the one hand, we all have an obligation to our governments, customers and consumers, suppliers, employees, and various other stakeholders to maintain viable businesses that preserve and grow jobs and deliver fuel for a range of essential uses. It's no lie that we all need to make a profit, and without a profit, we have no business. However, we have to be responsible about how we do it. And on the other hand, we also have a wide range of stakeholders with varying interests And we need to make sure that we transform our products and really make this journey towards a lower carbon energy source and preserve the future of this planet. As leaders, particularly in Africa, we have to find solutions for Africa's unique context, particularly addressing the historical disadvantages. Today, 43% of Africa's population lacks access to electricity, placing us far behind the curve in achieving our sustainable development goals of universal access to modern energy by 2030. The just transition continues to evolve, and for many of you that have been part of this journey, you will recognize this evolution. And it's been driven by macroeconomic and geopolitical forces, and we go through particular waves over time as this transition journey is going on. We gather each year here, and we recognize that we're constantly learning something new about ensuring that our transition, as we transition our economies, we need to do so in a fiscally prudent manner, cognizant of the social responsibilities that we have as a society. And we heard yesterday, what works for Europe and North America may not work for Africa. However, it places us in a very fortunate position of defining what will work for Africa. So simply put, rather than complaining, as leaders in Africa, we have an immense responsibility of making sure that we own this agenda around the just transition, and it can only be successful if we lead appropriately. We should mitigate against the potential adverse impacts on workers and communities, while also promoting the sustainable opportunities that are available in lower carbon industries, and that will offer opportunities to communities around us. In the panel discussion that we're about to have, we will look at how Africa's leaders can create a sense of self-belief and confidence in our own paths to decarbonization. We believe that actions taken to advance the just transition are most effective when based on a shared agenda. We also believe that Africa's industrialization must ramp up at pace. We cannot avoid an industrial revolution if we are to define our independence and take advantage of the abundant natural resources for the benefit of our continent. Africa sits with over 5,000 billion cubic meters of natural gas reserves that are yet to be approved for development. This is a lower carbon opportunity yet to be exploited, and exploiting this for Africa's benefit will certainly transform the economic prospects of Africa's people. Africa also sits abundantly with solar resources, and we are still behind the curve in ensuring that we define what is the new industrial revolution that includes all these lower carbon solutions. We therefore advocate for governments to play a leading role through the introduction of energy policies that address the energy trilemma that we face today. Government and business should work together to ensure security of supply, energy that is affordable, and energy that is increasingly lower carbon, prioritizing the disadvantaged being women and youth as they've been marginalized for so long. This will also help mitigate some of the social impacts that we find in poor communities and maximize the social benefits. This is an effort that BP fully supports as we future-proof our businesses in Africa and remain available to work with governments to achieve their goals. And as you may know, BP has a long, proud association with South Africa, going back at least a century. We celebrated 100 years in South Africa this year, and we've successfully partnered with government and society during this period. But what's important is that we still foresee a viable relationship with South Africa and intend to play a role in shaping South Africa's energy future. Our vision to optimize the hydrocarbon base and capture growth in our retail businesses through various opportunities such as convenience as well as low carbon growth remain a priority for us. We have a multi-pronged strategy in South Africa to transform the broader ecosystem, to create new Black-owned partners to support our growth initiatives, while working in partnership with state-owned entities who we believe are well-placed to lead the developmental agenda, if equipped with the right capability and capacity, and we remain on hand to support. We have a proven track record of broadening skills transfer in the industry and have renewed our resolve to prioritize the historically disadvantaged with a keen focus on women. So it's no surprise that this is the second time that we've won the Africa Energy Week ESG Award, as you saw yesterday. Some of these initiatives that we're involved in include the sale of some of our existing infrastructure to emerging players while ensuring their continued viability through long-term offtake agreements. This is a mutually beneficial relationship as we build new entrants into this industry. As part of this, we've also entered into cooperation agreements with finance agencies that are aimed at providing finance to empower previously disadvantaged and new entrants into businesses to acquire and operate assets in this value chain, as well as in the lower carbon value chain. And we contribute as donations 50% of the capital in some instances. We take our responsibility to be a good corporate citizen seriously. Our business is all about understanding what our customers want and delivering it to them. But to do so, we depend on the communities in which we operate and take great trouble to understand what these communities need. And then we develop solutions so that they can realize their potential and define their destiny. We've got various initiatives in support communities as we embark on this just transition. For example, we provide education programs through our fully funded Energy Mobility Education Trust, equipping South African youth with education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so that they're able to enter this industry and enter the job market with skills that are needed for the future. We also do this for people with disabilities. The skills that we impart to our next generation will be critical for Africa's innovation and digitization as we create a lower carbon solution, such as the much needed gas infrastructure to create viable solutions. We all are aware that our gas infrastructure in Africa requires significant investment, capability, as well as capacity to deliver. And we should be focusing our efforts on those two areas, being the gas development as well as solar solutions. Our focus to support governments across Africa in natural gas exploration has been enhanced through the recent $5 million acquisition of Belmont Technologies Series A to improve AI and digital capabilities in the upstream business. We all know it's becoming a lot more difficult to do exploration in the upstream business, and technology is what will set us apart. So this investment, we believe, will help our activity in Africa. Africa still has a long way to go in creating solid intracontinent and intercountry networks, and it's an urgent priority. We need to get together as Africa's leaders to ensure that we've got intracontinental infrastructure to be able to harness the power of the many billions that exist on this continent. We need to look at how we turbocharge this process, which starts with having the right skills and policies in place to ensure broad access. In closing, I've merely sketched the range of possibilities and obligations that face leaders of energy companies in Africa. This is a very complex environment and requires leaders to be determined, versatile, and diplomatic in the process to ensure that we've got a very good support structure across the stakeholder metrics. The future is in our hands, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
I'm asking her to stay there because she's part of the panel that's coming up on stage. I have no business asking a lady to go up and down in such pretty heels the entire time. So we're now going to go into the Energy Transition Summit. The panel discussion, as indicated, is Just Energy Leadership Dialogue. We're going to hear from a number of leaders, and this is, of course, sponsored by none other than BP South Africa. And when I was just reading about, the highlights of what we were going to get, a few stuck out at me. We're going to, explore the intersection of social justice, environmental sustainability, and economic development in energy policies and practices. But obviously, we can't speak about that without speaking about the policy making. Can you even speak about anything in this day and age without speaking about the technology and innovation? Because the future is all about that. Those are just some of the touch points that our different leaders will be dabbling in as we go into this discussion. Please help me warmly welcome to stage the following panelists, and I'm going to ask you to clap at the end. We have Dior Ndiaye, who's already on stage. Then we also have Khady Ndiaye, Vice President and Country Manager, Senegal, Kosmos Energy. We have Omar Diallo, Leader, Task Force Communication and Spokesperson, Telenga and ECOP. That's ECOP Projects for Total Energies. We then have Jean-Marc Kloss, Managing Director, West Africa, SLB. And we have Edgar Longwe, that's Group Director, Global Strategic Marketing, Technip Energies. A round of applause for our panelists, please. And although I'm the golden thread for the day, this will be really steered, this ship, by our moderator. Please give it up for the Vice President and S&P Global Commodity Insights, Michael Wynn. He'll be your moderator. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Africa Energy Week starts earlier every year. And you do worry sometimes how quickly people are going to make it here. So it's lovely that you've made time to join us. I'd like to thank you, Tyler. Marvelous presentation to kick us off. And I think there's one sentence that you said that really covers what we're going to talk about today. You said we need to define what works for Africa. And when we unpack that today, I hope we're going to get some answers to that. It's no secret the African population will be the largest working age population on the planet by the 2040s. And as Tyler said, it requires a sort of prudent and inclusive approach. It requires bold leadership, thoughtful, insightful leadership, but it has to happen at a pace too. So when we think about leadership, panel, it's a blend. It's a blend of personal beliefs, values and capabilities, and it's professional as well. It's the things that you and the companies you represent can bring to the transition. I think I'm going to start by asking you just to comment on that from your own perspectives. What do you think? You heard Tyler's definition. What do you think just energy leadership means for you? We'll start right over on the far side of the stage today, okay. I think.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning to all. And thank you also to Telo for this bright presentation. To me, when we are talking about just energy leadership, I think that it has been said this morning and yesterday, we have to take into account the reality. That is to say, we do have half of the population in Africa who don't have access to electricity, 900 million without access to clean cooking. At the same time, we do have, when we are talking about the countries which are the most suffering from the climate change, 8 out of them are in Africa, above all in Western countries, Africa, Niger, Burkina Faso, and so on. So when we are talking about this leadership, we have to take into account this one. And I think that, and it has been said, we should not oppose African development to also access to energy thanks to all the forms of energy. And in Africa, we do have today abundant hydrocarbon reserves. So I think that when we are talking about this leadership, we should, and it is the message delivered during the last COP28, we should make and give to Africa a right for differentiation and give to these countries the right to develop also their own hydrocarbon resources and to link these hydrocarbon resources with a strong governance. Because I think that if in one hand we develop oil and gas projects, in the other hand we should also reinforce the governance of also the resources, financial resources. So for me it is this, it is not opposing access to energy to development of hydrocarbon resources. It is also defining, and I will finish with this, a path for Africa. Africa will have its own path. It is not going with, from scratch, that is to say a stage where we do not have access to electricity, to green energy. It is quite impossible. So there is a path, and we are convinced that this path is by using LNG. So this is according to me.
That's great, and thank you for introducing COP into the room as well. So somebody had to, and I think we will come back to that as well, because again, we will pivot, I think, from Africa being an importer of thinking and strategy to an exporter because of its unique journey into the energy transition. It is the first continent and set of countries that have had to go through a transition with climate change very much on the global agenda, but that doesn't mean that it cannot lead and set a direction. Khady, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Talio, for your brilliant speech, very inspiring. And good morning, everybody. For us, the just energy transition is about providing the energy that the world needs today. And doing so using technologies that are, of course, climate friendly, but also being a force of good in the country where we are present. And when I look at Senegal, when I look at Africa, when we look at the figures, we all know this 600 million figure of people without electricity. I was told this morning that it's 700 today. When I put that in the context of my country, Senegal, we have 30% of the population without electricity. At the same time, we have 75% of the population using non-clean energy sources for cooking. And this is a lot in a country where we have discovered unique and immense reserves of gas that are still, largely not exploited, and that could be used, to provide the energy that we need today to enable us to develop our country and to offer cheap energy to our population. Yesterday, our CEO was talking about the US, where the energy costs are the lowest on planet Earth. And this could happen also in Africa, using the resources that we have, just by, using those sources as domestic gas, in the case of Senegal, to make the electricity cheaper and offering it to our population and making sure that, this gas can be used to develop our country. So just energy transition is about that. It's about allowing the countries to use the resources that they have to develop themselves, but while, progressing on the path of the energy transition. And when I look again, because I like to give figures about our country, because you need to look at Africa at the micro level. You need to make statements related to zones, to countries, and not broad statements. And when you look at Senegal, we already have 36% of renewable energy in our energy mix. This is a lot. So there is a path to the energy transition that has already been there. So we need to help the countries to progress on this path, and by doing so, allowing the countries to develop their gas resources, to reduce the usage of HFO, and by doing so, it's going to allow, if I take again the example of Senegal, it's going to allow the country to reduce the subventions to electricity, and this is going to unleash about $1 billion of extra resources that the country can use to develop itself, build infrastructures, etc., etc. So, in my view, this is what is the energy transition about. Allowing Africa to use its resources to develop itself while progressing on the path of the energy transition.
So in almost true engineering fashion, you've gone straight for a root cause there, and talked about. But in talking about addressing energy poverty, you also it's kind of referenced something that Tyler was talking about, which is if you're going to do that, you actually need to try and develop energy markets in Africa as well, and then you need the whole concept of intra-African cooperation and things to scale up. Jean-Marc, from your perspective, I know you and I, when we talked, your context of leadership also went down to listening from the ground upwards and letting people suggest as well. So bring your version of leadership, just energy leadership.
No, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me today, and thank you for the fellow panelists to be passionate about this topic, as I am. So just energy leadership, you mentioned leadership. Leadership is about guiding. So guiding a fair, inclusive transition to sustainable energy. So Schlumberger has been over 98 years now in the industry, over 85 years in Africa. And the vision is how we can unlock energy, unlock access to energy for the benefit of all. So it's really to get this resource out of the ground through advanced technology. And we do that sustainably. We do that locally, hiring local people, prioritizing local supplier, and that's how we can get it in a sustainable way with the local community. Now, around 2 years ago, actually 2 years and 1 week ago, we revealed our new identity, a new company, SLB, that is what we call a global technology company, driving innovation, energy innovation for a balanced planet. And really, when we talk about energy affordability, energy security, and sustainability, for us is the key principle for the just energy leadership.
Okay, so you're bringing in a very inclusive, you picking up on the inclusive angle, and also bringing in the very real challenge of doing it sustainably at the same time, making it something that can organically begin to propagate across the continent. Finally, Edgar, last but not least, before we come to Tyler, I take it a slightly different way.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good morning, everyone. And again, thank you for having me in this great panel. So, for the one who don't know us, so Technip Energies is a leading engineering and technology company with over 65 years of experience, and we have been in Africa for about half a century. So, with major projects from Mozambique, Angola, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and so forth. Right. So back to the point, Michael. For us, I think it's very important to emphasize in one thing. We are mentioning these 600 million people, so nearly 700 million now. But if nothing is done, that number is going to continue to increase, right? And I think it's important to have that in mind. Yesterday I was hearing that might reach about 1.2 billion by 2050. So we need to work towards innovations and solutions that help stopping that bleeding, right? And then to support in sustaining a just transition for Africa. For us, this is about leaving no one behind. So this is the way at Technip Energies we position and propose solutions that can fast track the scale up towards, let's say, a more just energy transition. So that's the first thing. Then secondly, you, Michael, mentioned about the working capacity for Africa, right? That number might reach about 700 to 800 million people by 2050, right? So this is more than anywhere else in the world, right? So, and it's a huge and fantastic opportunity for Africa, but we need to be in the position then to train and to orientate properly that opportunity of people, you know, towards the right industry. And we need these capacities, obviously, in the energy industry in Africa, but the level of maturity, obviously, is different from one country to another, right? And then same here, there are different ways of innovations, and innovations for us is not only about technical innovation, this is also the way we collaborate, this is also the way, I mean, we bring people together, the way we train the people, right? So, and we need to innovate in that space also, right? So, and last but not least, we need a business case for Africa, right? So, you mentioned it, Teola, we need a business case that allows us to have the right proxies. There are other countries that have made it, you know, China has made it, India has made it. I'm not saying that Africa has to do the same, right? But we need to compare ourselves and having the right references point and to define our business case globally for Africa, but also by regions, obviously, because we have a lot of disparities.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. You know, people think with a very different optic today because of energy transition thinking that didn't exist when China went into its industrial revolution and built many coal-fired plants. So it being the quickest way of bringing intensive amounts of power into the country, and likewise India. It is going through a transition still, but it was able to start its journey relatively unencumbered. And I think the other thing that you bring up is the pace as well. Let's remind ourselves of that by 2040, things are going to be very different in Africa, and consequently we need to have a very different looking continent by then in order to liberate and enable people. Tyler, if I could just sort of finish the thread with you, slightly different direction. You gave us a very good presentation at the beginning. I sensed in there was a lot of personal conviction as well. So how much is the personal side, your personal convictions, important as a just energy leader?
Yeah, thank you. I think the way I look at leadership is also about influence. And if we look at Africa's resources, and I'll get to the personal side, if we look at Africa's resources, it belongs to the people on the continent. Our government are the custodians of ensuring that we have social justice. And for me, what's very personal is the fact that we should be encouraging our governments to create policies that ensure that we bring everybody along. Yes, in our private companies where I have agency and as a leader, you make that difference within the organization that you have. But the reality is, if you want to actually change the economic prospects of individuals and of countries, we actually need the right policy statements and the right policy execution. Now, to execute, you need to make sure you've got capacity, capability, and so forth. And if you're going to look to the West to fulfill its promises, I think we're going down the wrong path. I often sit in some of these conferences and we hear about, you know, the West has promised this and that, and it's not about funding. We have the resources. It's about us defining our personal destiny and making sure that we use those resources and, change how we actually view energy. And another thing that's quite important for me is, you know, in Africa, we tend to look at countries in isolation, and that is a challenge, because we actually have the benefit of possibly being interconnected, and we've got various resources in different parts of the continent, and we should leverage the scale that we have and create that infrastructure and create Africa's value chain so that we can reduce the 600 million significantly. And having grown up in an era where, you know, energy was deficient in Africa, I remember when I was still a little kid, you know, we used candles, and then suddenly the lights came on and so forth, and you actually can see the change and the improvement that it brings in people's lives. So we should actually just make sure that we eradicate all of this, because it actually has a path towards poverty eradication as well.
And it's interesting you use the word eradication, because that's the same word medics use when they're talking about an endemic disease. So you see it clearly as something that it's a very forceful word. It's a very word that speaks of positive action. Let's stay with the theme you started to go down, and just talk about that fine line we're treading between the balance of caring for the people and eradicating the fuel poverty, energy poverty, and the sustainability demands that we cannot ignore. And sustainability can mean many things. It can mean the green thinking. It can also mean building things in a way that means they sustain and they persevere, and so you complete your eradication almost organically once you've created enough momentum. How do you see, it's a very, very fine and difficult path to tread, the balance of social justice and sustainability. What do you think are the most important considerations as we try and balance that through Africa's transition?
Yeah, I'll start with just referencing the gentleman earlier on spoke about seeing this transition. So the way we look at it is we have an energy transition moving from heavy coal, heavy hydrocarbons, and moving into, you know, your gas, your solar, and so forth. Now, the challenge that you face is we have so many communities that have been built on the back of the strength, the economic strength of hydrocarbons. And unfortunately, in those economies, what you tend to find is those hydrocarbons were largely exported, leaving communities destitute and not benefiting from that. So for me, it is something quite personal that says, as we now start going along the journey, how do we make sure that we benefit the communities, and whatever we do should be for the benefit of the community rather than exporting elsewhere and not being reaped back into the community. So as we now start, you know, continue in our journey on, you know, gas, LNG development, solar development, ensuring that whatever, for example, when you have a solar farm that's built in a community, and we need to make sure that the first recipients of that energy are the community themselves. If we don't do that, we actually may find ourselves as Africa being, you know, if you look at the old industrial revolution, we were mining resources and exporting them. The continent remains poor. In this instance, we've got to make sure that whatever we do going forward, key ingredient, I still keep going back to policy, and I never like talking about policy because I could get into trouble with with governments or different people, but it actually is very, very important for us to make sure that we make it inclusive and localize such that it benefits the local community. So that for me is a very key ingredient, making sure that the community benefits.
Well, we will, unfortunately, for you, come back to policies, but we're not going to approach policy in an aggressive and controversial way. We're just going to think about things that can improve pace. Let's stay with the synergy of social justice and sustainability, and thinking about that fine balance of caring for the planet and people. We'll go the other way across the panel, but panel, please remember, it's a dialogue. If you get very excited by something someone says, it's fine to bounce around a bit. So Edgar, your thought? Oh, sorry, Jean-Marc, you already want to come back on.
No, as you mentioned, it's a dialogue, and I just want to reflect for the dinner last night where I was sitting next to the executive director of the IEA, and when we discussed about social justice and energy transition, a big challenge is like for the employment, when you have people working in the coal industry that are going to move to the gas industry or renewable energy, you know, how you control, and how you are inclusive, you keep the social, the employment of these people. And when we had this discussion, that's one of the challenge of the energy transition, and how we skill our workforce, our population, to be able to move from one energy to the other. And reflecting on the discussion, you know, we talk a lot about local employment and developing the Africa leadership. But we also need to think about borderless carry, and when I see, like in SLB, what we do, we have around 5,000 people, African people working in Africa, but we have 4,000 African people working outside Africa that we are training and getting new skills, new competency to come back to Africa and to bring, to continue to grow the energy industry, energy transition within the continent. I just wanted to reflect and jump on the discussion.
Okay, that's a really interesting point. I'll come to you in a second.
Maybe to jump on this point regarding the sustainability and so on. And we do have, as international companies, we do have two or three issues. First one, it is about biodiversity and environment. It is how to take care of this. This is the first issue. So, for example, for Total Energies, we develop policies for having zero flaring, zero methane emission, reduction of CO2. This is the first point. The second point is about the local communities, and more generally about the job creations. You know, when you are on the construction phases, you do create a lot of jobs. For example, in one project in Uganda, just for the construction phases, we are creating 80,000 jobs. Now, when you come to operations, you don't need all these people. So how can you share the value with these people? This is, I think, one key point, because at the end of the day, if you don't pay attention, you will just pay taxes. But taxes is good for the country, but for the local communities, what do you do? And this is, I think, one of the issues we'll have to tackle with and we'll have to solve. And for our case, what we are doing now in Mozambique, and we are doing this in Uganda, it is to create a local foundation. For example, in Mozambique, we have put in place a foundation with 200 million USD, just to create jobs and just to create local employment. Because when we are talking about caring people, we are talking about creating value. It is creating value for the country, obviously, but it is also creating value for the local communities. It is building infrastructures. It is also giving jobs to the people. You know, I'm always saying that when you are discussing with a lot of people in Africa, I come from West Africa, when I'm discussing with my people in my country, I'm talking about new project or new oil and gas project. For them, the issue is not to see if it is linked to climate change or not. For them, the issue is how they will benefit from this project. Will they have jobs? Will they be able to create businesses with this project? If they will benefit of this project, they will tell you, yes, it is a good project. But if they don't see the link between this project and their own life and how they do change their life thanks to this project, maybe they will tell you they don't have any opinion regarding this project. This is the most diplomatic way. And the less diplomatic, they will say that they are against the project. So we have today, we cannot launch any project, we cannot operate any project without taking into account, obviously, biodiversity environment, but also how we do create value locally, how we do support local communities. And by supporting local communities, it is not just by saying, okay, we are paying taxes. This was maybe 10 years ago, but now we should not just stick on paying taxes, but how we do invest locally, we do create jobs, we do invest in farming, in small businesses. I think that, to my opinion, this is a key point. We talk about, we talk about policies. And I think that it is a good point, because we cannot disconnect energy to the whole investment in Africa. We are just saying, okay, we should invest in energy in Africa, we should invest. But I think by saying we're not succeeding. Why Africa just attract 3 or 4% of the global investment, not just in energy? Why? So I think that maybe we talk about this. We do have key points to tackle with. We are dealing with companies, they are private companies, they are doing businesses. It is not just about charity, it is about also business. So when they are thinking about capex allocation, why they do prefer investing in Asia or in South America than investing in Africa? I think maybe we'll talk about this later in the energy sector, but we cannot disconnect energy to the global investment.
Okay, Khady?
Yeah, just wanted to jump on some of your points.
It's great to see the passion, right?
Yeah, great. You made some great points. I think that social justice and inclusion should be really at the center of this energy transition. And as we develop those resources, we need to give access, to the local population, to the industry. But we also need to admit that in some of the countries, these industries are new. So we don't have a lot of skilled, workers who can work on the project. So at Kosmos, what we have done is to invest on, the training. It's to invest on the people so that gradually they can enter the ecosystem of our projects. So this is key because without educating, without giving access to training, you would have a lot of people that would be excluded from this ecosystem. But at the country level itself, there are policies that are forcing us, to include, as we progress in the project, local population. In Senegal, we have a local content law, and this law is very clear. Down the road, we will need to include, local population and give the priorities to Senegalese companies in our project. So we need to have in countries these deliberate, I would say, policies to make sure that the locals and the companies, local companies, have access to the industry. But for that, as company, we need to invest in the training, we need to invest in the people, and we need to make sure wherever we can that we give back to the communities. And this is very, very, very important. And this is what we are doing with our partner BP and Petrosen SMH in Mauritania with the project that we are currently running that have given job to more than 4,000 people in the construction phase of the GTA project. And this is a great achievement. It's not enough, but again, we are, I think, on the right track with the policies that we have at the country level, but also with the deliberate, I would say, purpose that we have as a company to include as many local as possible in the ecosystem that we are currently putting in place in the countries.
So super, and so both of you there have started to blend not just a question on the synergy of social justice and sustainability, but you also began to blend in the effect of policy as well, which is great because that brings some context to it in a non-controversial way. It's just focusing on the things that we think we need to see changing in order to enable access to finance, enable things to go faster. Edgar, I'm sure you want to join the conversation.
No, for sure. I think most of the things have been said, but just to emphasize on the local small medium enterprise, right? So the points that Jack and Khady you were mentioning, it's really, really fundamental, and we faced that in Mozambique with Coral FLNG projects that we recently delivered. It's really important to train the people, right? There are different levels of trainings, and this is what we have been through. There are trainings, let's say, at engineering level, obviously, which takes time. It takes time to have a process engineer that is trained and that becomes capable. So we need to be also aware of this incubation time, right? So the giving back takes time. So let's have that. In mind. So this is fundamental, and it went to training them up to very basic things, right? So up to how to answer to a bid. competitive bid, to win a specific award, right? So that has taken time to us. It's important we invest toward that direction. And obviously, we invest also in training our engineering team. So we started the first engineering company in Mozambique when we started the Coral FLNG project. So we sent these people to be trained in our expertise operating center all over the world. That they came back, then they were in a position then to train also the local team and then to make grow there. So, but I just want to emphasize on the fact that in the industry, there is the policies, obviously, that are more political, but there are also the industry standards, right? And it takes time to reach the level of standards. We are a very demanding industry, so we are a lot of safety matters related. So it's not just about training local SMEs to be in a position to serve the projects, but we need to make sure that it is done in a way that remains safe, and that is sustainable on a longer term perspective.
Okay. So, I suspect, panel, this clock down here isn't telling us the truth. I was told 10:05, and that's saying something very different. And if my watch is right, we're closer to time than we probably all imagine. Let's pivot for a minute then. That was a really good exploration of some core themes. One of the other things that Africa takes into the transition that others didn't have is the sweep around the world of digitalization, technology, and its ability to liberate the process of innovation. We all know once you've got people technically skilled with digital skills, innovation can actually happen at a faster pace. One of them is an enabler. The other is something that at the moment you could argue Africa is a net importer of innovation, but I bet it would love to be an exporter as it goes through its unique transition. Who wants to talk to me for a minute about the role of digitalization and innovation?
I can drop in. I think that innovation is key because we are into this forced energy transition where, developing technologies that are, climate friendly is today a must in order to get access even to financing. So I think that this innovation piece is a must and is also at the center of our job today, and it's also a challenge because without being able to develop new ways of doing things, bringing new technologies, releasing less carbon emission, we won't get access to the financing to develop the sector. So it's really at the center of the equation today, and we are, forced to work with companies that also have the same mindset and are also engaged into this energy transition with us, and that can deploy technologies that are responding to the needs of the energy transition. So I would say that it's a must.
Yeah, and I think just to probably add, if you don't mind, just to add, I think what's going to be important going forward is the concept of partnership and really making sure that for companies that actually have that technology and capability, it's not commoditized. Because once you commoditize it, we don't move at pace. We need to build partnerships that are mutually beneficial. For example, you could have, Kosmos Energy, developing a technology, but is able to use it for the benefit of course, commercially, but for the benefit of, the industry as a whole, such that you're also then able to probably export it. Because if you think about, as we're saying, we're probably at a different phase of, we're the first continent to get into this transition at a point where it's almost not by choice, but a necessity. And in so doing, who do we choose to partner with that will actually make sure that we, the digital agenda moves much faster than it possibly has in the past. And I think, if we work together as various companies, as well as, other stakeholders, we can actually move a lot quicker on the digitization.
So collaboration,
Yes.
Technology as a collaborative platform.
Yes.
Jean-Marc?
Please, please.
Oh,
No, thank you. And
No, please go.
No, come on, we can't toss the coin, guys.
Sorry, so no, maybe very quickly just on digitalization and innovation and I mean the value of technology. So what we've seen in the industry, and we are investing heavily on digital, like for the university, we provided more than $30 million worth of software just in West Africa, because we see we are talking about a lot about training, development, local development of African, that will join the industry and then can help to work on technology. And looking at technology in Africa, actually we have some big projects we just did in Ivory Coast, like the first net zero project with ENI Balen, where you see the value of technology. You bring technology that decarbonize the industry. So we know that Africa is going to have to carbonize before decarbonizing. And that's this, to give you an example of technology, we have some now automated drilling tools that give you a reduction in terms of efficiency of 30% to 40%, meaning that you can produce your hydrocarbon with less carbon, basically. So that's the type of technology that will help for the transition, we believe. So digital with technology is what will help us for the just energy transition.
And I think that's a really important point, and it's great that a project like Belen is testing the true net zero approach here in Africa, because if Africa asserts its right to burn natural gas and what have you, producing it in as neutral way as possible is going to be critical, as will be how it is then turned into power or cooking fuel. Shekhar, you get your go now.
Yeah, yes, as it has been said, innovation is really key, and we can see it in different fields. For example, for operations, today for Total Energies, we do use drones for some maintenance operation of CO2 or methane detection. For example, this is a kind of innovation in the field of operation. In the field of the final consumption of the product, what we have done is to launch a kind of competition which is called the Startup Project. It is for young entrepreneurship in Africa, and it is to encourage them to have new and bold ideas in terms of energy consumption reduction. And for example, in Kenya, someone has found a way to develop the LPG consumption with a pay-as-you-go system. That is to say, you just pay what you consume, and this was developed in Kenya thanks to this. And in Nigeria, we did have also the same, quite same idea, but it was on the trading of the LPG and the LNG to find new ideas. So we do foster and we do encourage new ideas in terms of production, but at the end of the day, also for the final consumer.
Edgar.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. So obviously for us, innovation and collaborations and partnerships remains very, very important. So in the case of digital, we see that as an enabler, obviously, to enhance the performance of the executions of our projects. In terms of social justice, climate justice, we develop solutions towards that directions. We recently launched our SNAP LNG solution, which is a 2.5 million ton per annum production of electrified LNG trains. So that's ways for us that we believe support in that directions, in partnerships. We partners in terms of technologies, also with other companies, because we believe that that's a good way to find out in these synergies that can happen between two companies. We have done that in the green hydrogen space very recently. And again, I mean, that's something I mentioned at the beginning. Innovation is not only about technical matters. It's not only about technology. We have to innovate on the way we work. We have to innovate on the way we collaborate, on the way we train, on the way we get ready for the next step for Africa, right? So it has to be that combo, that mix, that will support the transition.
Very good. So, I mean, by my reckoning, I think we're close to time. We set out to explore as a panel a number of things: the role of a leader in the energy transition, the role of how we bring sustainability alongside social justice. We talked briefly about policies. I think what I'm taking away from the conversation is one very important thing, that this conversation around the just energy transition is a very young conversation. And what astounds me and my association with this over just the last few years is how quickly it's transforming. It was an exceptionally blunt message just a few years ago. That blunt message is being refined now, and it's being refined because no longer is Africa just saying, hey, if we want to burn gas, that we can go ahead and burn gas. That's not how. That's now saying we think we will probably have to burn gas to drive this and enable this transition, and it's our gas. So let's use it for the people. But equally, there's a lot of considerations being baked in how that gets delivered, and it's interesting to see that message begin to come through in leadership conversations. I like the way that we contrasted the effects of big projects that benefit local communities, creating a whole ecosystem of supporting businesses and capacity. But we also went to more remote communities and looked at the role of governments and companies in starting small projects there and trying to build organic change. In other words, we're seeding in two places and trying to fan the flames of that organic fire of change. We agree, though, that policy is needing to evolve. Because many policies are old and the transition is happening at such a speed, it's not surprising that policymakers, who generally are not the quickest people in town in terms of the pace they move at, are struggling with the pace of change. And what we focused on was that policy really needs to bring intra-Africa collaboration. It needs to encourage and aid growth and entrepreneurism, because that releases change at a pace, and pace is something we came back to time and again. It's interesting that Africa technologically is starting to be a proving ground for net zero technologies. Where better if we need to produce hydrocarbons in a neutral way? And finally, we talked about digital for the people. And digital as a transformative way of driving, again, entrepreneurism and innovation. But we also talked about how digital technology is enabling us as businesses to do things faster, at scale, more safely, and even to prove when we say, look, this project's not flaring, it's not emitting, you can prove it with the measurements and the KPIs now. So, fascinating discussion. I'm sorry we haven't had time to come out for questions. So we're really on a tight... We got 5 minutes. Oh, that's brilliant. Okay. If there is a question out there, we'll take a question. We've got one question if there's a microphone. There is a microphone wending its way towards you now.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting panel, thank you. I'm in the LNG business since 20 years, and switching from coal to LNG.
Sorry, could you speak up? We're not getting a very clear signal from that.
Is it fine now? All right. I'm in the LNG business since 20 years as a consultant, and switching from coal to LNG will cut by half the emissions. However, despite the potential in Africa, and because of the lack of interconnections, we don't see these projects take off. Many of my customers say they just care about the price. So how to foster this coal to gas and coal to LNG switch?
Speeding up the transition to gas. Who's got thoughts?
The way I look at it, it's back to what we were talking about. He spoke about the intracontinental moves, and we need various stakeholders to actually help ramp that up. And it should be policy driven. I mean, if you bring all the various countries in Africa and you were to go and assess their policies around exploration, around regulation, whether they are a regulated market or not in terms of energy use and fuel for mobility, you'll find that there's so many differences. We need to actually get together and have a forum where we have a unified approach to how we actually, make that transition. And it's not going to be easy because there's some regions in Africa where probably coal is critical for the economic success, and in other areas it's actually LNG. But how do we find a common ground where we recognize that both have a role to play as we go through this transition? But we cannot do it as private sector alone.
No.
And I also think that at regional levels, we need to promote initiatives to optimize the usage of resources, optimize the infrastructures that are being built. In West Africa, we have the West Africa Power Pool. That is an initiative to, share and rebalance, the energy supply within West Africa. So this initiative, I think, could also be applied to the trade of LNG in the region, so that, we can make sure that there is a regional pool that is, addressing this necessity to share the resources at the regional level. So more initiative of this nature, in my view, should be encouraged, and also the optimization of the resources that are being built in the region to the benefit of broader countries.
And I think in that space, Khady, there is a very good example, obviously, with what is being done between Senegal and Mauritania. Absolutely. For GTA project, between inter-NOCs, let's say collaborations and intergovernmental collaborations to make the projects work. That's kind of first of a kind that has been very successful. So we need to be inspired by these type of examples to duplicate them in other places in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important, and thank you for the question. You really wouldn't want to be a policymaker trying to drive that one, would you? Because you've got coal with massive employment and economic dependencies, and a desire to move to something cleaner that can perhaps go at scale. I think over time, if policy and investment work correctly, we can see different types of electricity generation beginning to dominate in the market. But you're right, it's not for the private sector to kick-start that at the moment. Burning fuel oil, burning coal, those are at the dirtier end of the spectrum. But this is one of the things that needs, one of the core issues that will need to be put on the table and figured out. And again, who knows, an intra-African grid where different power sources begin to be shared and moved, that's a big enabler. We really are at time now, so I already summarised. It's absolutely fabulous to have shared the stage with you today. Thank you for starting us off, Tyler, with a great presentation. And what we've been able to get to is the fact that what was a very rough argument a few years ago is now highly refined. And really beginning to come together. And what's more, there's action to back the words. That's what I take from this. And energy transformation is now being led and being driven. Thank you very much, panel, for joining me. If you'd like to thank me, join me in thanking the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.